what's harder now about doing partnerships with AI and publishers and broadcasters and all that than it was doing, say, partnerships for Google and Slack in the platform building kind of era?
The first thing that's challenging is this whole AI evolution compared to SaaS and platform and anything else that's come is just so much more just game changing at every level, right? And obviously you can see that across the landscape in terms of how we talk about it, but you just have change at such an accelerated pace. It's blown through every expectation I think people have had about how quickly things would change. You also have, though, the precedent of the fact that, particularly for media and content owners, that past technological waves have not necessarily proven to be beneficial to them. You think about the impact of search, the impact of social media. There's always been sort of a wave that has come that has really altered their entire business model, and ultimately, most of the value has been captured by the technology vendors, Google being the most salient example of that, of, Google basically being just sort of the traffic router initially for content, and yet ultimately capturing basically all the meaningful revenue from that shift away from the folks that actually produce the content that enables search to be valuable and useful. And social kind of did the same thing. And so now when you talk to folks about what AI means, they're not, likely to be very open-minded to the idea that the AI changes are going to be positive for them. And I understand why that's the case. So that is, I think, an interesting dynamic where everyone's sort of seen this dog and pony show before, and there's just a lot of feeling of being like, is this really the end at this point? And there's been times where we've said it's the end before, and somehow journalism continues to sort of limp along, and certain brands actually have retained, strength and have been able to adapt and otherwise. But, so much of the middle has been sort of carved out, and certainly the long tail has been carved out. I think that's one challenge. The other challenge that has been interesting is that, my partnership background is not with media specifically. And so I have really had to make sure that I am not coming in as the technology evangelist to tell media and content owners what is in their best interest. I've really tried to take a role of listening and being someone that says that I want to sit on the same side of the table as them. I believe that they should play a role in the AI ecosystem going forward. I believe that them producing high quality content that is human generated is still critically important for the AI market to exist, which is kind of ironic, but I think that that is a huge part of it. And I want to build the kind of technology and infrastructure that is going to ultimately create revenue sustainability for the market going forward. But I'm not an insider. And so trying to balance that from a partnership perspective is always interesting. One of the tactics I use is that I've brought in sort of strategic advisors who are insiders. I attend conferences and other things where, it's a media-based group. But you definitely see that, I was at a conference for INMA, the International News Media Association, now a few months ago in San Francisco. I spoke, and they had many speakers from kind of the big Silicon Valley tech companies. So, Perplexity spoke, OpenAI spoke, Microsoft spoke, Google spoke, and then, a bunch of startups as well. And you definitely see the feeling of sort of like us versus them, mentality that is part of it. And being a challenger player, a startup, I think makes it easier to build some trust because you're not coming with the baggage of the large companies that already have sort of mixed incentives. But that doesn't mean that you're not a technology company at the end of the day, and that you're not, sitting in San Francisco and potentially removed from the challenges of these news organizations who have not always been treated kindly. Kindly is not quite the right word because it's business, but have not always reaped the so-called rewards that they might have expected when technology companies came knocking saying that they were going to do these like great partnership opportunities.
Been
So
exploited,
yeah,
right?
yes, yes.
Been exploited. That's
Yeah.
how to good ways of looking at it.